What is up, everybody? Welcome back. This is the Sifting, Reclaiming Authenticity. Today we have reached the milestone, episode number 50. We are still here. We are still alive. Some of you probably thought we weren't. But we are still alive and doing well. We just got out of summer. And today is what we're recording.
We just escaped summer.
We just escaped summer unscathed. But I don't know, I was walking the girls last night, and I feel like I was getting a lot of sun on the back of my neck. So, I don't know, I might have gotten out of summer with one last kind of big tan on my neck. So, anyway, I'm Jonah. I'm still Jonah. Have not changed. I'm still here with Lindsay. That has not changed, thankfully. Lindsay, how are you today?
Fine.
Fine. How was your summer?
Good and summery.
We act like kids coming back from like summer vacation, back to school, and they're like, "Oh, how was your summer?" And they're like, "Oh, it's great. I worked a job, or I did like baseball, or I did something." And I'd always be like, "Okay, I read some books and like played some games and did very little." Well, high school I did marching band, so that occupied a good portion of my summer usually. But
nerd.
Don't call me a nerd. Hey, I had the best calves you've ever seen when I did marching band. I swear to you. And the best tan, also. I had a great tan and great calves.
Great.
Anyway.
One thing I didn't do over the summer is get the soundboard fixed.
Yeah, that hasn't happened yet.
You may think, but Lindsay, you had so much time. But what I have more of than time is procrastination.
We are both like that way, though. You were saying right before we got on here, Lindsay, you were talking about, like, procrastination, how you feel like such a procrastinator. And I'm like, that's literally me, too. Like, you know, yeah, it's been a couple months since, like, we have really looked at the soundboard. But, like, me, too. Like, I also have not. Even though I've had, like, plenty of opportunities to do so. Like, I don't know. I like to think I'm not a bad procrastinator, and then I like to think this. I'm a procrastinator that is kind of like somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous, how you have to admit it, and then you're just in a process of, like, trying to fix it. That's what I'm like. I admit that I'm a procrastinator, but I'm I'm just eternally trying to fix it. Why do you think people procrastinate?
I don't know. Having bunches of time and procrastination go hand in hand.
That is true.
I feel like if something is like has a deadline, like a really soon deadline, I don't procrastinate.
Sure.
It's time.
Yeah.
Time causes procrastination.
That is interesting. The more time you have, the more procrastinating you do.
The more procrastinating I be.
Yeah. Well, it's like, when you have time, you have lots of options to do stuff. And it's like, are you going to do something that requires a lot of work and effort when you have time? No. Like, you want to do something that is, not going to take a lot of effort on your part.
I want to go to the zoo.
Yeah,
I have time.
That's what we're doing tomorrow. So... yeah, exactly. It's like, if you have free time, you don't want to spend it like doing chores or doing something that you know is going to be like a pain or whatever. You know, I want to like spend time with you or read a book or do something like that. So anyway, that's us rambling for 3 minutes about procrastination. We have no answers. So if you're a procrastinator, like and comment on this. And
we can't help you.
We can't help. We cannot help with that. We're not going to do an episode on procrastination because we don't know.
We have no answers.
We have no answers to that. That's so funny. Anyway, we hope you guys all had a wonderful summer. We certainly have. What did we do? Lindsay, you had a birthday. I'm trying to think what we did over the summer. Time marches on. I'm trying to think of what we did over the summer, and my mind is blanking. Even though I feel like we've done a decent amount. We've gone to the zoo quite a few times. We're zoo adults, if you didn't know. We...
Adults, like Disney adults.
Yeah, like Disney adults, but with the zoo. If you happen to be listening and you don't live, like, where we live, we have a famous animal at our zoo, and it was super cool. Well, the hippos at the Cincinnati Zoo are, like, royalty. And the last time we were at the zoo, it was super cool because Lindsay... it was like it's like a cove where you like walk down into like a cove area, and it was flooded last time because it rained that day, and a lot of people just kind of marched on out of the zoo because they didn't want to have to deal with the rain. We stayed and just like waited it out, and we went down towards the hippos near the end of the day, and there was nobody there, and the whole area was flooded, so it's not like you could really get like down into a good spot. But because Lindsay's small, she was able to kind of like shuffle her way up on like the edge of the hippo cove, and she got some one-on-one time with Fritz the hippo. And that was super cool.
We're besties now.
He's a great hippo. That whole family, honestly, is
great family. Great hippos.
Great family, great hippos. That's like it's like Cincinnati's version of like the royal family. Like Tucker, Fiona, Fritz, and BB. Not in order of age. But yeah, we're zoo adults, so we're looking to go. Tomorrow's Labor Day, so we are looking to go to the zoo and spend some time there.
Not for you.
We're
reporting from the past.
Yeah, we are reporting from the past. So we'll let you know in a couple weeks how that visit went. Probably just like all our other visits, honestly. Won't be too much. They have a lot of like special talks, though, tomorrow. So that should be pretty cool. I like going to those. Getting some more in-depth, learning about animals. We came out in a mood today. Gosh. I don't know why we're in such a laughing, comical mood today. Well, this is not a comedy podcast. It might turn into that in a few minutes if we keep going this way.
No.
This is not a comedy podcast. This is the Sifting, Reclaiming Authenticity. What? We have episodes every other Monday. They usually go live at 8 a.m., and it's about an hour of us just chatting about all sorts of different stuff. Ministry, theology, leadership. Today we're going to talk about like church size. Just stuff that's on our minds, stuff that we enjoy talking about. This is super kind of casual, kind of laid back. It's more of a conversation. It's not really like, trying to teach anything, really. And we don't, claim to know any answers about anything. We don't. I mean, about some things, sure, but we don't do this on behalf of a church. We don't do it on behalf of a ministry or anything like that. This is just me and Lindsay in our house, talking about just topics that interest us, talking about topics that have been on our minds, on our hearts lately. And so we appreciate you guys being here, listening to us. Listening to somebody or watching somebody on a podcast is a time commitment, and to know that you enjoy listening to us is really awesome. So thank you for that. You can like, comment, subscribe, all the content creator kind of stuff. That's awesome. That helps us out a ton. Lindsay makes some absolutely wonderful and beautiful art and graphics for the Sifting that you can find on Instagram and Facebook. She does an amazing, amazing job. The last one she made was maybe her best that she's ever done. Just go look at it. And if you like the Terminator, check it out.
The Ferminator.
The Ferminator. If you don't know what that is, just go look. Okay, awesome. I don't think did I cover everything?
Sure.
Sifting, sure, I think I did. Social media, episodes every other Monday, 8 a.m. Yeah, I think I got everything. Cool. So we just got back from the summer, and we have so many different things that I feel like we have been wanting to talk about. Lindsay just mentioned something to me today that we'll definitely do as a topic later on in this kind of set of 10 that we do. Essentially how we do it, if by some means you haven't listened to us before, we basically do episodes in a group of 10, and then we go away for a little while, take a break so we don't get burnt out, and then we just come back with another group of 10 episodes, and that's kind of what we do. I think that's a pretty good flow that we have. So today we're talking about church size. A really interesting topic that I don't think we've talked about before, but I think has a lot of really interesting I think we have a lot of really interesting insight into this. That makes it sound like we have some sort of hidden secret, which we don't. I think we have a lot of really interesting thoughts about this that I'm looking forward to talking quite a bit about. So, obviously, you drive down the street anywhere. Well, here, especially. Or if you just do a Google search.
Reporting from the Bible Belt.
Yeah, reporting from... Well, we're north of the Bible Belt. I don't think we're quite Bible Belt. When I think Bible Belt, I think deep Mississippi. Deep Alabama. Anyway, we're close to the Bible Belt. I think we're just on the northern side of it. There's... Oh, I thought you were pointing at the map.
No.
So if you just do a Google search in our area, if you just search for churches, I bet at least 50, probably 50 to 100 results will pop up. And we are in a heavily populated church area, I think. This kind of tri-state Ohio area, I would honestly compare it to something Cleveland, Tennessee, or Dallas, Texas, places that are just heavily populated with churches, not just one specific denomination or one kind of type of church, but they're everywhere where we live, and that's fortunate. That's awesome. It's great. But it's interesting when you do a Google search just for churches, how many pop up and how vastly different they are. Obviously, there's a lot. There are many different denominations. There are many different churches of different kind of sects of Christianity that kind of all branch off from the same core kind of gospel truth. But what we're talking about today is the difference between large ones and small ones. So here's a question that I was thinking about and that I feel like I've heard a lot of people talk about before. And Lindsay, I'll ask this to you. Just give me your honest opinion. Do you think that larger is actually better? What's your gut feeling?
For me, yes.
For you, yes?
Yes.
Why?
Because I like to blend in and
Same.
not, stick out like a sore thumb, as I've never been there if I'm coming in.
Same. I agree. But I would say as a concept, in terms of when you're talking about health of a church, do you think larger equals better? More healthy?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
I think it's too complicated and up to individuals which is better.
Agreed. Yeah. It's weird because I feel like I have heard people discuss this kind of thing for a really long time. And what I feel like the common opinion is kind of what you said. And I don't disagree with what you said whatsoever. I think the common opinion is that whether big or small, a church is not solely dependent on its size to determine its health. I think that is kind of the shared belief about church size. I don't know if I know anybody that says 100% if a church is bigger, it means it's healthier. Or 100% if a church is small, it means it's healthier. I really have not ever ran into somebody like that. Most people kind of are in that middle ground that say, well, health is not really determined by size. And I think I agree with that to an extent, but there's always been something that I have thought about that I don't feel like gets discussed very much. So number one, of course, there's quite a few factors that determine church health. It's obviously not just size. Like you said, Lindsay, a lot of it is dependent on the people, not only the people that run it, but the people that go there, the people that have significant amounts of influence with the congregation. All of those things, I think, are more important than size to determine a church health. It's the people that are there. I think it's also what is being taught there and what is being preached from the pulpit. A lot of churches are large, but they preach things from the pulpit that are questionable. A lot of churches are large that preach great stuff from the pulpit. So that is not necessarily... I just lost my train of thought. What I'm trying to say is teaching and the content of what is being taught is equally as important. So personally, I would place people and teaching over size to determine a church health. But I do feel like we undersell size when talking about church health. I think that it matters more than we sometimes give it credit for. And I kind of phrase that like this. Now I'll just read it like directly from my notes. Overall health is not solely determined by size. However, size is usually indicative of overall health. So I don't think that size is the only determining factor for health, but I do think it is a symbol of overall health, if that makes sense. I kind of view it this way also. Healthy things always grow. If something is not growing, it means that it's not healthy. Again, and it's not to say that like small churches can't be healthy too, because I think that sometimes small churches don't have access to the resources that bigger ones do. I think about I wrote down here local population. Some areas, I know a lot of the Bible Belt, Mississippi, Alabama, parts of Tennessee and Georgia, a lot of them are not highly populated areas. And so, yeah, you don't see a church with 1,000 people plus, usually, outside of maybe a few that are really well known. You don't see those as much because those areas are not as heavily populated as a place like here, where, just off the top of my head, I can probably think of 5 churches that would be technically considered a mega church that's just in our local vicinity of tri-state Ohio. So some places don't have the population to have a large church. Other churches don't have resources or finance to be able to really grow themselves beyond what they have. That's, as much as we try to talk about money like it doesn't matter, it does, I think, as a church. If you can't have enough, if you don't have enough finances, if you don't have enough availability to resources, obviously you can't grow. And I think the churches that do grow have a lot more availability to those things, whether one way or another, than some smaller churches do. So all that to say, I don't think that a small church necessarily means that it's unhealthy. But I do think that churches that are striving to grow and churches that are growing probably means they're doing something right. We want to hate on mega churches, and really I think that started with the whole Jimmy Swaggart stuff way back in the 80s, was that? 90s maybe?
Don't know who that is.
Oh, you don't know who Jimmy Swaggart is?
Nope.
Okay. I'll tell you about it later.
Sorry.
So
Sorry.
I think the megachurch hate really or I guess not hate, that's a big word. The megachurch criticism really started with like the Jimmy Swaggart scandals in the 80s and 90s. And ever since then, it's like people have just not trusted large churches. I think about like Joel Osteen's church, Lakewood, and how bad of a reputation it has gained in some circles because of, how they talk about money or finances, or, particularly what is taught there. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, all these people that are criticizing it, that church is way more successful than them. And again, success is not the only determining factor for health, sure, but it is a sign and it is a symbol that something is happening that is good and that is right. And so I feel like megachurches have kind of unfairly come under some heavy fire. I know that some things are like taught and preached about that, a handful of people disagree with. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel like, shouldn't every church try to strive to have, what a megachurch has? And it's like, if some churches don't want that, why? Like, why are they not necessarily seeking that? That's like the dream of, a healthy church, to get to a place of influence where, like, what they're preaching and what they're teaching and what they're doing is, like, reaching more people, and it's available to more people. Like, we hate on, like, churches that are on TV, but you didn't see the people that were, like, praying and believing for a TV ministry when that church had 45 people in it, and believing that, like, what was being taught from the pulpit and what was being kind of birthed in that church was something worth many more people experiencing, was something worth many more people having. And it's like, do you know what I mean? I just feel like there's a stigma that's kind of unfair. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that? Just like megachurch stigma in general? Because I just don't buy it. I just don't buy into a lot of it. Do you have to agree with everything? No. But it's like, and are you free to criticize? Sure, of course. But like, I feel like some of that is unearned. So I feel like the size discussion is missing the point in some ways. And I think we undersell how important size actually can be to a church's health. I don't know. What would you say?
I mean, I agree with you on, like, a lot of parts of that. I mean, I think a lot of the hate is obviously, like, jealousy. You can't say that it's not jealousy to some extent.
Well, sure.
But, like, mega churches, the bigger you are, the more influence you have, and the more careful you have to be. Because it's among, like, large ministries, mega churches, that they say one thing that's unbiblical, and it gets taught everywhere. It goes off like a fuse.
Yeah.
Just spreading from other large churches to small churches everywhere alike. So, with that size does come, like, an extreme jump in the required responsibility they have for the culture of the church as a whole and what's being taught to the church as a whole. I think that's why when people disagree with a megachurch, they tend to disagree so strongly because the larger churches are kind of leading the culture. So, the opinions are going to be stronger against those really influential things that we disagree with.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Really interesting. Because it's almost like, it's funny you say that because just today, and Lindsay, you'll know why, but like just today I was thinking about this like rope illustration that was done by a pastor named Francis Chan. This was years and years ago, 15, 20 years ago now. He did this rope illustration.
I think he did it at Winterfest when I was like
yeah,
a teenager, early 20s.
Yeah.
So that's long ago.
Yeah. And he did, just look it up if you don't know what it is. He did this rope illustration in the sermon one time. And this thing, to this day, 20 years later, people are still using the rope illustration every single week in churches. It's like, I feel like every church I've ever been to has done the rope multiple times. And I can't help but, like, when the rope gets pulled out, I'm like, I feel like, I can't imagine that when he did that for the first time, he would think that it would become as influential as it was. And he wasn't even at, like, the level of a mega church at some other, mega churches were. And it's like, think about how much influence that had on, like, everybody who had seen that and everybody who was taking that to their church. And I don't think we've had, something to that level again. That's kind of spread like wildfire through churches. But I agree with you when I say that, like, or when you say that other, like, large mega churches are kind of setting the trends, and they are kind of establishing what sort of influence other, like, the churches that are, I won't want to say underneath them, but the churches that are beside them are doing. Like, I think of Elevation at this point is probably like a top 5 church in the United States in terms of size and influence. And it's like everyone hears Stephen Furtick's messages, and then 3 weeks later, everybody's preaching it at their church. And I think he probably knows that he has, like, a very high influence, I would imagine, like, in the American church as a whole. Somebody like T.D. Jakes or Joel Osteen.
A lot of things that come out of Bethel.
Yeah.
That, especially in our, like, the denomination that we come from, are, like, kind of weird and questionable to us.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jensen Franklin. Like, I don't know how many times I've heard whatever it's called, the Spirit of Anaconda message.
Oh, the Spirit of Python.
Yeah.
That was cool.
That's another one I heard when I was a teenager, and then
that was awesome.
Never stopped hearing periodically.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been the discussion recently about what's his name?
Joel Osteen?
No. Oh my gosh, his name just fled my mind.
Michael Todd?
No, he's an older guy.
Driscoll?
Accent.
Benny Hinn?
Yeah, Benny Hinn.
There we go.
About Benny Hinn and him teaching some wild stuff, and it just spreading like fire, even though it was totally, like, weird.
Right. And it's like, yeah, people see stuff like that, and the tendency to write off these largely influential ministries is tempting. However, at the same time, you have to realize that, like, I really feel like some of these people, like Stephen Furtick especially, not just him, but, like, some of these people are, I feel, truly called and gifted to, like, speak to a generation of people in a way that can really change the world around them, and the way that can bring people into a level of faith that they may not have known before. And it's like, maybe, have we ever stopped to think that maybe God elevated them because what they were doing and what they were preaching was something that was so beneficial that other people simply had to hear it, and that other people would benefit by hearing it. I think I just got like real mixed up with my words, so I'm sorry. It's our first week back. Like, let's have some grace on me if I say some things that just sound weird, right? Anyway, yeah. So I just think that there's kind of an unfair stigma that's sometimes put on these churches when they have a place of influence for a reason, and whether or not you agree with everything that they say or everything that they do. I think there's a certain amount of just kind of general respect that's missing. Those people are successful for a reason. You didn't see the years of praying and the years of work and the years of fasting that they put in to have that place of influence. So, I don't know. Anyway, do you have any other thoughts on that before we move on?
It probably, like you said earlier, has a lot to do with like where the money is also.
Mm-hmm.
People get crabby about their own money and probably church money even more so. So just like the amount of money that's going through these large churches is, I'm sure, also a reason that they have these stigmas.
Mm-hmm.
Which, what they do with it can be healthy or unhealthy, but the general kind of mindset of people is more money equals bad people.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned T.D. Jakes earlier. Shout out to T.D. Jakes. I think he is, in my opinion, maybe the best living preacher on the planet today. I heard him one time in Tennessee, and I'll never forget getting to listen to him. And he's somebody that, has a megachurch who has been heavily criticized for many, many years. He's been around for a very, very long time now. But, when I listened to him in person, this was probably 5-6 years ago now. It was life-changing. It was incredible. That room was full of people in tears, so moved by what he was preaching and what he was saying. And so, yeah, shout out to TD.
And he's spent his fair share of time on Preachers and Sneakers.
That's right. The man has style. Oh my gosh. He'll post on Instagram before he goes out to preach on Sundays, and I'm I don't know if this man is in the ministry or leading a kingdom in a fantasy novel. The way he's got these robes, it looks hot. He looks awesome. Anyway, I say all this to challenge our perception of how we view small versus big, and I think it's really easy to see through the lens of a newcomer. I think about someone walking into a church for the very first time and the kind of experience that they have, and that says a lot to me about the effects of a big or a small church. It's difficult when you have been a faithful attendee at one church for many, many years to put yourself in the shoes of a first-time guest. That's really hard when you've been somewhere for so long that you just call it home, and it's like a second home for you because you know everybody there and you're very familiar with how things operate and what happens. And it can be hard to put yourself in the shoes of a first-time guest. But I kind of think about this analogy. This reminds me of being a first-time guest in a church. Think back to when you were young, and if you had to change schools at any point when you were a kid, think back to that time in your life. in your childhood. And it probably was anything but easy. In fact, it most likely was one of the hardest things that you ever had to go through as a kid. Because at that age, you may as well have like walked into a new country. Because like your hometown and your school is all you know. I mean, that's pretty much your entire world. There is no, bigger outside world that you know of or that you've explored really. And so moving to like a different community or a different school is essentially moving to a different country. It was like a different culture with brand new people and a brand new system, brand new social system. It had its own language that you had to figure out, that you had to learn, because there was always the fear in the back of your mind that you were going to be left out if you couldn't adapt, if you couldn't figure out how things were done, if you couldn't figure out how to be in the in crowd. And you had to figure that out fast because people made quick assumptions, people made quick judgments, and whether or not, they were actually doing those things or actually making those assumptions, that was how you felt. You felt that you had to do something to fit in. There's a really cool song by my favorite band, Rush. Lindsay is probably tired of hearing about them. It's called Subdivisions, and it's very cool because the song is about a kid walking into like a new school for the first time and what it's like, and the horror and the terror that you can sometimes feel when walking into a new place, and the struggle to fit in, the struggle to not become an outsider is something that is the entire world to a kid. So changing schools can often be one of the most challenging things that a kid has to go through. I think that's analogous in some ways to like going to a new church when you're an adult. Obviously, it's not as dramatic as I probably make it sound as a kid, because as an adult, you've matured a little bit more. But I think that coming to a new church can be sort of an analogous experience in some ways. We enter this like brand new culture with brand new language, one that is specific to that group of people. And it can be a more distressing experience than we sometimes imagine. It's like I said, it's hard when you've been a faithful attender at one church for many, many years. You don't realize that you're speaking a certain language and that you are engaged in a social system that people who are coming for the first time might not feel like they ever can be a part of that. And so, to me, I think this is really well seen through the eyes of a newcomer, and I think that affects their desire to be in a small or a big church. And so, I don't know if that ties super well actually into the next thing I wanted to talk about, but it was something that I had here that I wanted to mention. So, like I said, first episode back, have some grace. I wanted to talk for just a couple minutes about going to, I guess, a small church versus being in a large church, and just the differences that they have, and talking about why I think it fits some people and why others might have a hard time fitting in each. So if you think about like a small church, to me the first thing that stands out is that smaller churches tend to have a more close-knit family feel, because there might be a max of like 250 people that go to that church. It was kind of how the church I grew up in was. I would say it was more medium-sized. We had probably 500 people, 500 to 600. And so it never really felt super small. But in some ways it still had that kind of very close-knit feel with a lot of people. And so I imagine that a lot of smaller churches kind of have that too. And I think that like for people that are more extroverted, I think that fits really well. And people that kind of value the relationship side of church will probably fit in a little bit better at like smaller churches. And that's something that they do that a large church can't necessarily do. When you walk in on a Sunday and there's 1,000 people in the sanctuary, it's a very different kind of feeling when you walk in and there's 100 people and you leave knowing 50 of their names. And it's like, I think that for some people that doesn't really work super well, but for others, it's something that is very comforting, and it's something that I think fits really well for them. And so I actually feel like extroverts, people more outwardly engaging, actually kind of value that experience easier, because I think that an extrovert is looking for community and they're looking for connection with the church, which is not necessarily, I think, what introverts are always looking for. But I think that's an advantage that a small church has that a big one doesn't necessarily. Also, I think small churches have a lot of opportunities to do more because there's just less people, or like have a higher influence. Again, because there's just less people. Yeah, there just seems to be like a lot more availability to do certain things. I also think that small churches tend to be far more, this is not always the case, but I do feel like more often than not, they tend to lean a little bit more towards traditionalism than a large one does. And so people that find value in a more traditionalist church experience, I think tend to enjoy smaller places better, because that's kind of what you tend to get. Again, that's not always the case. I've been to smaller churches that had a more modern feeling, but honestly not too many. And I don't know, Lindsay, if you would say something different. But there's usually like a consensus of shared belief in a small church over a larger one. Usually on like secondary and tertiary issues, what I'm talking about specifically. They tend to share beliefs about, gifts of the Spirit, beliefs about baptism, beliefs about just how ministry and like community life is done in general. Smaller churches tend to be more agreed upon in those things, whereas a large church, when you have so many people and you have so many diverse schools of thought present, it's not quite as traditionalist as an environment as some people, I think, are looking for. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about just small churches, Lindsay? About anything I said? I kind of rushed through this super fast.
I think when you say traditionalist, yeah, I think the place where you like really immediately notice kind of the more traditional side of small churches is the dress code. I guess.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah.
I think you can immediately see that, the smaller the church, the more likely they are that they're still dressing up to a good degree for service. Where, larger churches, to quite a bit of an extent, have moved to coming to church very casually dressed. Which you may agree with, you may not. It's kind of the battle between come as you are and, like, I don't know, looking nice for Jesus.
Looking nice for Jesus. That's right.
So,
Lord, I hope you're impressed by my 3-piece suit. Anyway, yeah. I feel like, as I really thought about like this topic today, one of the things that stood out to me the most, actually, out of all my notes that I made, was how unified a lot of like small communities are on their belief system. And again, it's not obviously like if you're a Christian church, you believe Jesus is Lord, but on those kind of more secondary issues like gifts of the Spirit or dress code, like you mentioned, there seems to be a lot of kind of agreement on that, and there's not a whole lot of diversion and thought regarding those things. And so For some people, that's really important. Some people value that greatly, and I think small churches tend to be more. Um, I don't want to say faithful, but they tend to be more consistent um, with that sort of thing than a larger one. Okay, so let's talk about big churches. Mega. That's the mega on the board over there. Um, Going to a large church, the first thing I usually think of is there's just more availability in their programs and in their ministries. A small church might have like, you know, a Sunday service and a youth night and maybe like a men's breakfast once every 4 months. But a large church has a lot more availability to kind of offer more. It sounds, I want to say services, but it's not services, it's ministries. But it's funny because it sounds, the language is similar. Anyway, um, there tend to be more availability in programs and a higher catalog that allows people to experience kind of a wider world of ministry that they may not have known before. So, for instance, a large church will probably have like a production department. They might have something like a photography department or a social media team or an outreach team. They not only have youth group, but they have, nursery, and they have a kids ministry, and they have a young adult ministry aged 18 to 35, and they've got like, a Gen X ministry, and you know what I mean?
Small groups.
Yeah,
For
small groups.
every
Right?
age and like breakdown you could think of.
Yeah, so there's a lot more diversity in the ministries themselves, and I guess the catalog of what you can be engaged in and what you can be involved in a larger church. I think that's attractive to a certain group of people. I kind of put this in quotes here. It helps people become formed in their quote unquote like ministerial identity. I think that like having a higher catalog invites people to explore their gifts and talents in ways that smaller churches don't necessarily get to. For instance, in a small church, there's only a couple things that people can kind of explore as far as like gifts and talents. They can explore like a worship ministry or a preaching ministry or teaching Sunday school or something like that. But if you go to a large church, it's really eye-opening how gifted some people are at these more, I guess, at these
nuanced.
yeah, these more nuanced areas, like having a really excellent production director and having a production ministry that allows people to explore their gifts and talents in creating lights or doing sound or making graphics or photography. It's I feel like the ministry world has opened up so much to allow people to more and better explore the kind of gifts and the kind of talents that they have, whereas smaller churches don't necessarily get that opportunity just because they don't have as much. I also feel like, did you have something you wanted to say regarding that? Okay, you looked like you did, so I just wanted to make sure.
Sorry.
No, it's
I'll
okay.
look less eager.
No. You're gonna look less eager.
Yeah.
Just, that's funny. I feel like large churches tend to be very family focused. Kind of like I said, they have higher access to something like a kids ministry, a youth or young adult group, singles groups, married groups, stuff like that. They tend to be a lot more accessible to people that have families. Like, I've met people before that if a church does not have a nursery or a kids ministry, they just won't go to it because they're like, I need to have something for my kid. Like, I can't be trying to wrestle my kid in service in front of everybody. And if like a church doesn't have one, they just won't go. Or a youth group, they're like, my teenagers have to have something to go to, because sit at home and play video games for 12 hours a day, and they need something to like go and get, they need some Jesus in their life. They need some ministry to happen in their life. And if they don't have that, it's like they just won't go to it. And so I feel like when we walk into a large church, I feel like it's very much like family oriented. And I feel like the largest demographic in those places are like people in their late 20s, 30s, early 40s. You know what I mean? Like the people with kids or teenagers. I just feel like they're far more accommodating. And I think that's why they keep growing, is because as like millennials and millennials and Gen Z are growing up, they're getting married, they're having kids, they need more availability to a church that's going to accommodate their family. And I know it sounds weird because I know we shouldn't be like quote unquote shopping for churches, but like these are things that matter deeply to people that are looking for somewhere to go. And so I feel like their focus on families and their availability and their accommodation to families a lot is one of the things that kind of buoys their growth and allows them to keep growing. And also, there's just a better chance at a large church to blend in. If you're an introvert, you don't want to walk into a church and have everybody look back and stare at you as you walk in. And that never happens in a large place. You can walk in and walk out, and you don't have to be recognized. You don't have to be seen. You don't have to be...
It's your choice if you want anybody to know you were there.
Exactly, right. You could go to a large church for 10 years, and it's like some people may not know that you've been there the entire time. So there's as little or as much involvement as you feel called to do. And I think that's a really wonderful thing, because some people, we talk all the time about how we want people to get involved and how we want them to serve, and all those things are great and good, and people should do those. But some people just they don't have the desire to be seen, and they don't have the desire for that or the energy for that external stimulation. And so I don't know, do you know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. So it just seems to fit introverts a lot better. Like I feel like that's the case with me and Lindsay. Like, we're both pretty introverted people. I know we may not seem like it when we get on the podcast and we start talking about procrastination and goofing off for a couple minutes.
Or if you've ever seen either of us doing stage ministry, we're like 0% of...
Sure.
You get what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
We're like not introverted in those moments.
Sure. But it's like we're both pretty introverted at heart. And so it's like these sorts of places appeal to us a lot more, not only because of our demographic, but because of our just our individual personalities that we have. It seems to be kind of a nice fit for us. So what does it all kind of come down to? I think it just comes down to this. Your preference for a smaller big church just depends on your taste and your values and your personality. And those are difficult questions to answer for a lot of people because I think there's a lot of overlap in both of those areas. But I think it comes down to your values, what matters to you, what is important to you in a church situation. And it's like I said earlier, I don't necessarily think that shopping for churches is a great attitude to have. I don't think that's how we should be looking at church in general. But I think these are things to like prayerfully think about, and some things to prayerfully discuss with a spouse or whoever you're attending with. I feel like you have to have a real kind of discussion about values, what it is that's important to you, what kind of teaching, what kind of people, if you have kids, what kind of ministry are you sending your kids to, what kind of people are you putting them around, and And I think it just comes down to personality. Like, what kind of fits your personality? You know, our individual selves were given to us by God. Some of us are outgoing, some of us are not. And we don't necessarily have to. Sure, you can become extreme in either one of those areas, but I feel like we shouldn't be ashamed of how we were made. And so, for some people, they love the connection. They love when they walk into a small place and they get to know everybody. Some people love walking into a large place and allowing themselves time to be involved, and allowing themselves time and where they can serve where they want, kind of on their terms when they're ready. That's very valuable to a lot of people. And so I think it just comes down to, you know, how you're wired and what's going to work for you. You don't want to put yourself in a place and in a situation where you're going to be just straight up uncomfortable. Not that being uncomfortable is always a bad thing, but you don't want to put yourself in a place that is going to just constantly be at odds and constantly be clashing with either your values or either your own individual personality. So I don't know. Those are just a couple of thoughts I have. Lindsay, did you have, before we close up like we're closing shop, before we finish it out today, do you have any thoughts about that you want to share? I feel like I've talked for a long time, and I'm sorry.
I feel like when talking about the two, it can be a sign of something not going right, or maybe like bad health, when like a large church or small church, or even maybe like you could group mid-sized church in with either or, are trying to be one another. Like, we have seen where a church is like too small for all of the programs it's trying to offer. And it's trying to be big church. It's trying to offer that kind of all of those categories of ministry, and it's just not doing them well. Mm-hmm. Because it does not have the resources, mainly people, needed to provide all of those. That you end up burning people out that way. You just don't have the resources to stretch. And we've seen that, like, ministries suffer when they try to do things like that. When small church, or even like mid-small, tries to be big church, and they don't have what they need to do it. Mm-hmm. Or I think when big church can kind of try to be small church is when leaders, like pastors and any of the, like, elders, worship leaders, try to give people, like, too much access to them. I think, like, people having access to a megachurch pastor, like you're able to have access to a small church pastor, is like a recipe for disaster. Like, a megachurch pastor with that kind of availability, like, we'll never see their families again. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Because they just have so many more people vying for their attention. That's like, I think, if you want, like, a large audience with your pastor, I don't think you can be happy at a megachurch.
No.
I think you have to be at a small church if you need a lot of access to them, which I don't know why you would. Maybe you want to be mentored or something, or you just like to complain.
Like I can't complain about the lights anymore, like, or I can't complain about the volume,
Yeah.
like, because I just don't get to see the
You're
pastor
not going to
anymore.
be happy at a big church if you like access to leaders. But that's what I mean, like, big church trying to be small church is like, you just the same way the small church doesn't have the capability to offer as many programs as you do not have the capability to form as many relationships as you might want to and be as available to your congregation. So if you see like mega churches and mini churches kind of trying to be each other, I would say that's kind of a red flag as to health. It's not going to go right for somebody.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Really well said. All right, did you have any other closing thoughts or comments that you wanted to mention?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think I did either. Yeah, we just wanted to come and talk about this today. I think there's obviously, for different people, different things work. And this isn't necessarily a discussion to put one down and raise the other, even though we certainly come into a discussion like this with our own preferences. And of course, those are going to come through. But we really wanted to just take a minute to celebrate what we think each does well and talk about why we think each fits for certain people. And I feel like it's a topic that's pertinent to a lot of people. I know I have plenty of friends and family that don't attend anywhere, and they just have a hard time finding something that's a right fit for them and finding something that is a good place for them. And it's like, I feel like it's wrong for me to just come in and say we'll do this or do that, but I almost feel like presenting some options that you can prayerfully work through, like your values, like your needs and your personality. Presenting those things, I think, can help us find the right place. And I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that Christ died for the church, and he entrusted people with his church. And he promised this church that he would be with us to the end. And he asks his believers to do the same. And he asks us to value the church in a way that the outside world doesn't necessarily value their programs, doesn't necessarily value their social gatherings. Something different is happening because the Spirit's at work and the Spirit is present as the body of believers is gathered. And so it is important, and it's something that a lot of people I think struggle with more so than they would admit in a normal conversation with another believer. But I think with the Spirit's help, we can all see value in different kinds of churches, and we can just see the mission of each and how it kind of ties into the overall gospel and what Christ is doing in our world today and through the hearts of believers. So yeah, that's awesome. I don't think I had anything else. So let's pray and we'll be finished. So Lord, we just ask you, well, first we thank you for our time here today. We thank you for our discussion. So many great points that we talked about, so much great, just fulfilling and enriching things that we talked about here today. We pray that it is a blessing and that it speaks to the life and the heart of somebody or many people listening. We pray, Lord, that they would be blessed in what they do and prosperous in all that they do. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Guys, thank you so much for returning along with us to the Sifting, Reclaiming Authenticity today. It felt good to be back, felt good to record, felt good to come here and just stretch our legs and talk about a topic that is important to a lot of people and I think very pertinent to plenty of believers today. So Guys, thank you so much. We'll be back in a couple weeks. We'll let you know how our zoo visit went tomorrow. We will see you all in a couple weeks. Goodbye.